There we go.
Dude,
How's it
I'm
going?
doing well. How about you?
Pretty good, bro.
Dude,
Pretty
is,
good.
is your last name really Ferrari? Or is it
Yeah.
it is?
No, people think it's a ghostwriting name or like a pen name,
Yeah,
but
I used to
that's
have a
funny.
ghostwriting name called Ferrari Williams that I would opt into funnels with, so I was always curious.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, good branding then on that.
Yeah, I think it made life a little easier, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Where are you located at?
I live in Hawaii.
Oh, sick. Also good choice. You're just making a bunch of good choices in life. I am
Yeah,
in
it's pretty
Arizona
nice
in the
out here.
summer.
Say that again.
I said I'm in Arizona in the summertime, so one of
Uh,
the worst choices you can make. Yeah.
yeah, what's it? 110 some days, right?
Yeah, it is. It's just now starting to slip below 100 degrees per day, which is, but yeah, anything above 105 is not great.
I was in Texas a few weeks ago and it was about 100 and wasn't all that bad because there's no humidity. My
Yep.
whole life I've spent on the East Coast, so like
Oh, where'd you
I'll,
grow up
I'll,
at?
I'll in Virginia. So
Okay.
I'll take no humidity over full humidity and 90, 95 degrees any day of the week.
That's probably similar to me. I think Virginia's about the same as where I grew up, laterally, central Illinois. So like yeah, it's worse for sure. And I feel blessed to live in cool places, but yeah, there's a certain point where it's just like straight sauna here, but it's not any worse than maybe a cold Virginia day.
How did you wind up there?
Work my career. I'm from Central Illinois, then moved to Colorado because I didn't like accounting, and then I got into this like quote unquote industry by meeting a guy named Cody Sperber in a mastermind, and he lived in Arizona. He was called the Clever Investor, and he convinced me,
Yep,
or I convinced myself to come down there and work for him. So that was the first time when I was in AZ, and that's where I met my business partner Josiah was our star student there. So I told them when I left Clever, took a few years, but I'm like, if you ever want to teach, let me know because I know you're doing more deals than like our guru, basically. So the rest is history.
that's cool. Yeah, I've exchanged a few emails with Cody, so it
Oh,
really truly
nice.
is. Everyone's like 1 degree away from each other.
Dude, yeah, it's crazy. Like I think I credit Cody for like at least half of the success in my career because I was young, he pushed me very hard and I didn't want to fail in front of him. I had a lot to prove, so he just made me good.
That's sweet.
Hmm. Yep. So that's my story. I'm curious yours though. How'd you get from Virginia to Hawaii?
Oh man, it really connects into the whole copywriting thing. So let's see. Try to think about years here. I graduated college 2007 and I had a good job. I worked for Booz, which is one of the major consulting companies. Uh,
Hmm.
and it was a pretty decent gig. I was living in Washington, D.C., but kind of just like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do. My father surfed when he was young. And living in Virginia, we didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to surf, but every summer he would take us on vacation a couple times here or there.
Yeah, I
So we
heard
kind of got
Virginia
the
Beach is not the best.
yeah, it's well, the problem is that it gets good basically this time of year through the winter. And
Mm.
so you have to be pretty gung ho if you want to surf all winter
Right.
long.
Yeah.
Um, plus we were where I grew up is 2.5 hours from Virginia Beach.
How are you into
S-
on the
Uh,
Appalachia?
no, we weren't country folk. We were actually just outside of DC.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, so I had the bug my whole life, and my brother was in the Marine Corps at the time, and he lived in San Diego, and that just sort of furthered the desire to surf. And
I
I was
bet.
basically about to move to San Diego, or seriously considering it, I should say. And then incidentally, my uncle lives over here on Maui, and he had just built this crazy nice house. This was now 2009-ish, and I'd never been to Hawaii. So I came out here, stopped in Honolulu, which is where I live now, and within, 30 minutes of getting off the plane, I was like, I want to live here.
Yeah.
And so, in a very roundabout way, basically, so where I am right now, there's a Booz Allen office about 3 blocks that way. So I thought I was just going to be able to transfer to that office. But
Uh,
they kind of pulled my strings for really about a year or two, and it never ended up happening. So finally, I was just like, I'm going to do this on my own.
Dude, Fortune 50 or Fortune 500s are the worst at that. Yeah, that's like a
Yeah, I mean, it
tactic.
was it was pretty disappointing. But
Yeah.
anyway, it all worked out for the better because at the time SEO was big. And so I started being like, oh, maybe I'll learn how to do this thing and I can just make my own career.
Hmm.
But somehow, so I went to University of Virginia, and somehow there was an alumni from University of Virginia who was kind of big in all these digital nomad circles, and he had become a surf photographer in Bali and was selling his pictures online. And I just randomly sent him an email and was like, "How did you make that work out?" And he's the one who first told me about copywriting. He said, "If you really want to do something kind of on your own, keep in mind this is 2011, so it's still like,
Yeah,
there's no Facebook groups, there's no YouTube channels, there's nothing on any of this other than these
yeah,
blogs about digital nomadism, basically."
right. Nomad Matt, I
And
remember it's the first one I ever
yeah,
saw.
yeah, yeah, those guys. So this guy, he just said, "Look, if you really want to do this, there's a great thing called copywriting where you can build your own schedule, you can surf when you want to. There's already a good remote market for it at that time."
Sounds like a copywriter. He sold you the.
Yeah, and I mean, he didn't really have to sell me that hard because I had studied marketing in school, and I was like, okay, this sounds pretty good. I like writing.
Uh-huh.
And within 6 months, I was out here. I had quit the other job and was just kind of like scrapping to make it all work out. The story I always tell people that makes their eyes kind of pop out of their head was that the first job I took was off of, I guess is it Odesk now or it was Odesk? I don't
Yeah, I
even
remember that.
remember, but it was
Yeah.
off of that, and it was $15 to do like this long SEO brochure. So my hourly rate on that was probably like $3, but
Oh man, I
that's
respect
where
that so much. All like the
that's where I
product
started,
writers
and
I've
that's
worked with,
yeah.
yeah, are like that. They're just like not knowing what they're worth of. But I mean, at the time, you had to prove yourself something, and I'm sure it
Oh,
accelerated your
I
career.
had no experience, and so I would wake up, do whatever I had to do in terms of fulfilling those projects, and I would go surf the rest of the day. I really was kind of like living the dream other than not making any money. And then
Oh,
I would come to Starbucks after dinner and just study. And that's how I got into Copy Hour with Derek Johansson, which was a huge thing for me. I started reading all these Dan Kennedy books, and I just became sort of obsessed with the craft and
yeah.
got pretty good at it pretty quick, I guess.
What
And
what was the how, if you don't mind me asking,
yeah, yeah.
is there a base skill or a personality tendency that you felt like that made you pick it up faster than everyone else?
That's a great question. Something that, well, I've always liked writing and I've always liked reading and probably pretty intellectually curious around a lot of things, which I think is helpful to be a copywriter, particularly one who at that time I wasn't specialized or anything. And I've never actually really been specialized. I've kind of bounced all over the place. But I think the other thing, if I could like call whatever talent I have as being God given, it's actually not writing talent. It's the ability to just recognize patterns and really unpack them. My mentor, Aaron Winter, who was or is probably one of the best financial copywriters ever, and he was who hired me into the Motley Fool, which is a whole other story.
Yeah,
But
dude,
he
I want to
he's
unpack so much here. Because yeah,
he
you
said,
if I looked
well,
at
here,
you and say like financial copywriter, right, I would make some sort of stereotypical guess as to what
yeah,
job
yeah.
you would write. Yeah,
Well, that's the whole secret of that industry
right,
is you go into those offices and no one looks like Wall Street or whatever.
right.
But anyway, what I was about to say is he said that the thing that he's always found that made me different is that I have a very high return on information, which is his way of saying like for everything that sort of comes in, I'm able to get more out of it.
Ooh,
And so I've always been really good at looking at comps in a market and saying, here's the 10 reasons why it works, but here's the five things that they missed. I've always been able to like draw similarities between reading. Like I said, I read a lot, and I think unlike a lot of people in the market, I read a lot of fiction, and I find that that helps my writing quite a bit. I watch a lot of serialized TV for the not for the same reason. I actually love it, and I think it's an incredible art form. But I'm able to, be disconnected at 9 p.m. at night watching some sort of TV show and go, oh man, you see
Yeah.
like that technique that the screenwriter just used, that's something that can go into copy.
Interesting. I wonder if do you know Myers-Briggs at all?
I do, but man, I can't. I've taken it a couple times. I want to say I was an ENTJ the first time I took it, which at this point would have been 20, almost
Uh-huh.
20 years ago. And who knows what I was the last time I took it.
Yeah, I wonder if it falls similar to me because not everything like similar, but I also the way I'm creative is indexing and then pattern recognition. It's just like the more I
Mm,
read, the more inputs in different fields, the more I can see patterns, the better I get. I'm
yep.
really bad when I don't know anything because that's just core fear. Yeah, so I'm not like the some people are just like brute force. They're like, let me overpower you from like a pure conviction frame type thing and moral good or like whatever it is, and that's never me. To write from a moral
Yep.
good frame, I have to basically get there myself and research it myself. So it hits. That's very, very on point on for me. Mm,
Oh yeah.
yep. Yep. Well, dude, since you're a copywriter too, do you want to see the brief that I had my team draw up before we got on here and I was looking at this because there's
Sure.
a lot of good names. And there I don't know if this was self-claim Max. I'm gonna actually have to ask you after this too, but I knowing all the copywriters on there, like that's a heck of a list and that's a heck of a compliment too. So um yeah, like knowing all those guys, like Sean was a mentor to me and Kemp I love. Chris I met like 10 years ago and he was like on top of the world 15 years ago in a like leopard print speedo at an affiliate summit.
Yeah, he's the
He gave me
man.
the craziest advice for career I ever got in my life. So like all those guys are legends. I'm curious, um, as you progressed in your career, what was maybe were there any like again accelerating points? Like you already kind of got it. You had a mentor you said that was brilliant at financial copy. Anything else that stands out?
Well, that really was their turning point. I mean, I went to the Motley Fool 10 years ago, actually, like 10 years ago last week. Um, and Aaron's the one who hired me into that, and I could tell that whole story. But just for example of how foundational that relationship is, I talked to him like 3 days ago for 2 hours, and he was helping me through some stuff that's going on in some of the work that I'm doing right now. So a relationship like that to me, I mean, it transcends work, but it also, if you could plot my career growth before and after, it's like, you know,
Uh, and I would love to do that. That sounds like an activity I would enjoy.
and
Plotting
it's,
someone's
well,
career.
it was complete chance, to be honest. So I was living here, and the girl that I was dating at the time was a patent attorney. And so basically, what the patent office told her was, we want you to come work at the US Patent Office headquarters for 18 months, and then you guys can go back to Hawaii. And this was also maybe 30 minutes from where I grew up. So I was like, all right, that's cool. Like, I'll go spend some time being closer to my roots and my parents and my childhood friends. And this was when I was really scrapping, still in that first kind of 2 years of just taking jobs for way less money than anyone should probably ever have to work for. And what happened was my dad sent me, so I mentioned I had a marketing degree, but that degree is actually marketing and finance. So maybe some of this is
Uh,
destiny in some ways.
yeah.
Um, my dad sent me a job posting that Street Authority, which was one of the other big financial publishers at the time, was looking for copywriters. And that didn't end up going anywhere. But on the side of LinkedIn or wherever that posting was, there was another posting that the Motley Fool was looking for a copywriter. And so as I got to look into it, it turned out that physically the Motley Fool's headquarters was the building right next to the patent office's headquarters. So
Okay.
that also was kind of like a little bit of a twist of fate, I guess you could say, that I was randomly dating a patent attorney and she got called into the home office, and that home office randomly was next to the Motley Fool. So that kind of made my eyes perk up and I applied for that job. And Aaron was the copy chief who was doing the hiring, and he put us through the ringer. I mean, he had dozens or hundreds of candidates and made us do all sorts of stuff, including write one of their front end VSLs. And through that gauntlet, I kind of won the last man standing award and got hired in, and then just worked under Aaron, who, like I said, is absolutely brilliant. Smartest human being I've ever met. That's not hyperbole at all. Um, and he just took me under his wing and basically taught me everything he knew. And then after we left the Motley Fool, we did a bunch of agency work together. Aaron basically started up an agency that went to go work for a lot of the competitors, Agora Financial, Profits Run, other
I was
big
gonna say
financial
four P's
publishers.
is a dead giveaway that someone I feel like's been close to the Agora ecosystem.
Yeah, well, that might actually have come from like the actual traditional marketing
Maybe,
background.
yeah, like I have no idea the origin. I'm not as much of a historian of like tracing it all the way back as some people
Yeah,
are.
but
Uh-huh.
who knows? I mean, it's all
It's
just goes
good.
in at some
Yeah,
point and
it's
never never escapes. Um,
uh-huh.
so yeah, that's just like he has been, whether we have a transactional relationship going or not, which we haven't for the last several years, but he's always just been there in my corner, like ready to basically do anything that I ask to help. And he's become an incredible friend. And I just hope, it's like I hope everyone can stumble into that sort of relationship because it's life changing. And I know it's hard and not everyone gets that fortunate. So I consider myself very
Interesting you said
blessed.
stumble in is the terminology. And you probably caught me doing something similar. I said some similar word choice. So like I like got, that's how I view it always. But when I hear other people say it, I'm like, I bet it wasn't stumbled in. I bet he did something to put himself in position. Like lucky
Well,
people are good
it's
at
kind of like,
probability.
so like I said, I went to University of Virginia, which was founded by Thomas Jefferson, and so I have all his quotes like locked in my head. And one of his quotes is something to the effect of, and this is a slight paraphrase, but I find that the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah, me
And
too.
so it's kind of like, yeah, these things are all chance in some way. I mean, our life is just this accumulation of little tiny things that happened, right? But how you react to them and what you do and your responses and everything else that sort of has led you into that moment and what you're going to do. Yeah, that's all on you. That's your responsibility. I believe
Yeah.
that pretty firmly.
Yeah, no, the common pattern I guess I'm now just seeing is that you reached out to that nomad, right? He didn't reach out to you and you asked him. You were intellectually curious about it.
Yeah.
You reached out to Cody after I didn't hear back about getting the job and I thought like,
Oh,
hey,
wow. That's
so
big.
this and the I was gonna say kid, but the guy, 20-year-old who put together what I just showed you that like that summary essentially, he 35 days ago reached out to me and said, I'll work harder than anyone ever has for you. And that's the only reason that it worked out. I like tested a few, but I'm like, that's
That's pretty
not
sick.
normal behavior. Like that's like I wish people did that more. So I was gonna like normally you get on something like this. I'm like, Daniel, do you need copywriters? You're like, yeah, we're begging for like people. And I'm like, good, they're growing so fast. Like, guys, click. And like you'd be stupid not to work with Daniel, which I believe, by the way. So you should do it through traditional channels, but untraditional channels often work better for people like me, at least. So
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked this question quite a lot because I've mentored a few copywriters, which is like, how do you build the brand or build the network or whatever you want to call it, right? And I always tell people there's a very high energy way to do it. Uh, Someone who's high energy is going to be posting on LinkedIn and posting on Twitter and creating a lot of content. I just never really had the patience for all of that.
uh,
I'm I'm the weird thing is I'm kind of a creature of routine, but in like a weird way, because surfing almost forces me to have no routine, which I suppose forces the rest of my life to have a lot of routine, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, surfing's about flow, right? For you, I'm
Well, it's
guessing.
about flow, and it's so yesterday, for example, I surfed from about 10 a.m. to noon. Today, there's no surf, so my whole day is a completely different schedule. Thursday, there's plenty of surf, but on the North Shore, which is like an hour from here, so my whole morning will be surfing. So like every day is different, every week is different. But
Hmm.
I think that leads me to want to have basically structure within the bounds of the unstructured day to day. And I always found that being heavily involved in content and social media and all of that didn't really work in that regard.
Got it. But
And
this does.
so,
Is this working so far? Or
so
is
yeah,
it more the pace of the content and the idea
I
of the
think
cover?
what it was is like, well, one, it's allowing myself to participate in things like this, which is actually what I was just about to say, which I think I've done a very good job of allowing myself to be, I don't know, connected to connectors, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Uh, I
Super
have a
connected.
pretty good network. You know, you just showed some of those names, like Justin Goff's a good friend of mine. I know Haddad very well. Peter,
All
I know
incredible
very well.
copywriters. You guys don't know. Yeah.
So I've just kind of cultivated a lot of relationships and never really expected much out of them, to be frank, but always more or less knew that behind closed doors, the conversations were always kind of what you just said, like who's got the good copywriters? We need good copywriters.
Yeah.
Even
Where are
today,
they?
as much as I could go on a whole rant about AI, but even today, I think that copywriters are still in pretty high demand. Um,
Hmm.
but it's always that it has to be backed against this. We're basically, only as good as our last win in this industry. And that's one thing I've always loved about it is it's pure meritocracy. Yeah, you have to be a good person. People like working with good people. People don't want you to be an asshole and you have to deliver. But above all,
But
it's like if you can create conversions and sales, your name gets tossed about. And so I guess I was always just like, let me put 80% of my effort into getting really good at this and
hmm
maximizing my results. And then the remaining 20% can be meeting the people who I just find interesting in the industry and then letting the rest take care of itself, which, as I say, it sounds kind of laissez-faire, but I
dude,
think I've said enough that it's actually not like just completely throwing it out into the wind. It's like when that ball comes
um,
back around to me, I know what to do with it.
I'm starting to think I understand. I find you personally very intriguing as a character because you said that you're not patient despite your presence being very calm and zen, which is a difference too. And then you also said too, like a good copywriter would, open the loop on I could rant about AI, but then you didn't, which indicates discipline and self-control. So like I'm curious with that being said, besides curiosity, is that how you win? Is it curiosity plus some sort of self-control?
It's interesting. The one that pops out of me right there is gratitude. Like I'm always trying to be very
That's it.
grateful.
Maybe that's what I'm sensing. Yeah.
Grateful for everything. And so maybe
Yeah.
it's that great gratitude kind of forces a little bit of the calmness or the patience that you're
It
noting.
must be. Not a lot of copywriters have gratitude. I feel like you're right. That like you're right because you identified with it. So you are perception's reality. But now I'm seeing it too. It's just so it's interesting to me. Because mine are
Yeah, like
different. But yeah, like
uh,
zest and like high energy and social media is not how I win either.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Optimism and gratitude of that list is probably or curiosity, excuse me, curiosity and gratitude. Like
Huh.
optimism is probably a close third. I'm always pretty confident that things will work out, but that's a little I don't want to sound
Which made
self-righteous.
you
Like I
great for
have I
Motley
have my
Fool, I
doubts
bet.
and all that too. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
in
I mean
fact.
you have to be a highly optimistic copywriter to write for them, which
Yes.
then you go to Agora and you're a pessimist, but you got to
Okay.
wear a different hat depending on what the role
Right.
is.
So if you were writing for Agora versus Motley Fool, and my dad bought from Motley Fool, so it probably tells you a little bit about
Yeah, yeah.
him and maybe my childhood. Um, and then, dude, I'm really curious if you had to associate a certain stock or a few stocks with good copy that you wrote, do you feel like that you were able to actually um, to write good enough copy where specific stocks come into mind is like, oh, I wonder if they held that because they saw that in my Motley Fool newsletter.
Oh man, this is gonna challenge my memory a little bit.
Yeah. It's like that made my dad go bankrupt and lose his job. Then we'll have a full
Yeah, I did write one on NXP semiconductors, which
I'll text him right now. In XP?
ended up, yeah, ended up being one of the chip manufacturers for Apple. And I honestly don't know what happened to them. They're still around. I know that because I drove by one of their offices when I was in Texas recently.
All right. I just texted.
That's the only one that really comes to mind. I mean, this is not related to copy at all, but sort of one of the things that I always laugh at is when I was at the Motley Fool, and that was 2014. I said 10 years ago, it's 11 years ago. 2014, 2015, they were already like 10 years into banging the NVIDIA drum.
Yeah,
And I,
my dad had Nvidia because of that, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so
yeah, and I
fascinating.
didn't listen to any of that,
No, I never
unfortunately.
take my own advice when I'm ghostwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a distraction I found because if you have shiny object syndrome in general or entrepreneurial qualities, the worst thing I found is as a copywriter is to start like trying to do all the stuff that you're telling people to do. It's like that.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, you can convince yourself that it's the best
Yeah,
move
that's
for
the
you.
problem. Is
It may be the best move for somebody else, but your best move is probably just to focus on the work.
Yeah, I had to learn to draw that line. But early in my career, I did that a few times. I remember like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. I should maybe look into that. I'm like, nope, 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 nope. Don't do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So fascinating. Well, dude, what's besides AI, what's on your mind in like the immediate present moment of like what do you need right now? What is even energizing and is maybe a better question versus what do you need?
Um, what's energizing? Well, it kind of there's two answers to that.
Cool.
There's at least in the industries where I've been working the most, financial publishing, supplements, things like that. There's kind of this ongoing question around the people in our world of are we about to start starving because all the baby boomers are getting older? You know, there's a
Mm.
very big generational aspect to the mass markets. And
Why would I actually didn't connect it like you did. I feel like that's your talent, your superpower is your brain connected it for you. Like it didn't inherently, I'm like baby boomers getting older, people starving. To me, it's like dying, more food.
well, no. I mean, starving is, as a figure of speech, like, are the copywriters going to start going
Oh, got you.
going broke? Um, so, well, really, I think that a lot of these mass markets are driven by generational forces.
Yeah.
But the question is it purely generational, meaning baby boomers versus Gen X versus greatest generation, or is it more of an actual age thing where this long form copy that is sort of based on impulse purchases, is it that just somebody once they're 55, 60 years old is looking for that level of basically dopamine hit by consuming that marketing? Or is it that it's only baby boomers? I fall into the former group, to be honest. I think that it's actually just once
Generation.
people are a little bit older, they're just looking for a little bit more of an escape, to be honest, into some of these different storylines and worlds and things like that.
Okay. I
But
would
a lot of my counterparts think it's a baby boomer thing, and so there's almost
once
this
the baby
crisis
boomers are dead, they think no one's
because
gonna
baby boomers are getting older, yeah, and so that
I don't believe
somehow
that.
the
Yeah.
whole industry disappears, yeah, and I don't believe it either because I think you have quite a bit of data points that show, you know, if you look at sort of the golden age of copywriters, Gary Bencivenga, those guys, they were writing in the 80s and 90s, and their target market was actually more like my grandparents
Yeah.
who were greatest generation. And so I think it's just sort of this cyclical thing. What I do think is happening that people are mistaking is the storylines. There's basically a necessary format change, meaning for the last 15 years, a long form video sales letter has been just this unbeatable format.
Hmm.
And it's gotten to the point where it's evolved so much and the market's gotten so saturated on it that it's not cheap anymore. It used to be when I was at the Motley Fool, even we could just put together whiteboard slides and it would crush. But even as I evolved in my time there, or as the business evolved, we started doing more of the high production VSLs. And fast forward today, it's almost a requisite, right? You almost cannot get response, at least in the super saturated markets, without just throwing a whole bunch of stuff into these VSLs. And the next thing you know, you used to be able to launch a product for a couple grand. Now it's 100 grand, right? And so there's just a whole lot of expense involved. And I think the necessary evolution of that is we're just looking for cheaper, easier formats that aren't as saturated. And so you see a lot of people going to hybrid pages where you have a shorter video, 10, 15 minutes on top of a ecom
Yeah.
page, or just purely more like not product pages, but ecom pages that have a little bit more selling power, bringing copywriters into stuff like that where maybe they weren't previously. And that's all fine to me. Like it doesn't worry me. It's not this crisis moment because, again, I look at sort of the history of whatever you want to call it, direct response marketing, performance marketing, direct to consumer marketing. I think semantics doesn't matter. Um, those formats have always changed. Infomercials were the best format for a while. Direct mail was the best format for a while. Newspaper ads was the best format for a while. And now we're just sort of seeing perhaps VSLs are kind of on the tail end of that adoption curve and new formats are starting to win. And that's fine. It doesn't mean that
The
baby
world's ending.
boomers are
Yeah.
the only thing that makes money in that industry or the world's ending, like you're saying.
I agree with 95% of everything that you just said there. Is to me like you have a better fundamental understanding and seeing the patterns. Because to me, I'm like, oh, I think it was Ogilvy that said just like only great writers like long copy superior to short copy. I forget what the quote is, something like that though.
Something like that.
Long
Yeah.
copy
It always
sells more than
outsells.
short copy. Yeah,
Yeah.
like is that really a generational gap? Because Ogilvy wasn't a boomer or even maybe even greatest. Like it superseded multiple generations. So the likelihood that it's generational, I think, is low. And like you said, you're drawing comparisons to what's a long form sales letter. It's really just a means of format that or not a means of format, it's a format, and then the means of consumption of someone wanting the long form is really just time oriented or personality oriented. So like when people retire, they have more time, so long form makes more sense logically that they would consume instead of like TikTok reels. But
Yeah.
I guess the only other argument I could see is algorithms are getting so addictive that people don't have a choice, and then it's going to fracture attention into a million pieces. And if that's the case, then cool, that might be where we're headed, but I bet it'll lead to a correction and a reset. Because normally when that happens and it's fired against us, right? We're going to get to a point where we just go offline and then it'll just reset back to normal. So either way, Daniel, I think like copywriters are going to be fine. I agree with you. I can't see a world where persuasion goes out of style.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I've always looked at it, if you want to really just strip it down to the purest elements, it's like most of the selling that happens, or most of the purchasing that happens in the direct to consumer world online, it requires a certain amount of selling, which requires persuasion, which requires a certain amount of messaging. Whether that messaging happens all at once or it's extended over weeks and weeks and weeks in some of these organic content things. My fiance works for one of the major influencers online with millions of followers and all of that. And so that's what she's playing a whole different game, right? I'm playing a game where I'm trying to get somebody like that. She's playing a game where it's
Yeah.
this tiny little thing. But at the end of the
Uh-huh.
day, it is all we're trying to more or less influence somebody's purchasing decision, which is very different than when I walk into the store and just buy whatever. So I think as long as that's the case, there's going to be a need for somebody to say, how do we create this influence? How do we create this persuasion? How do we get the sale? Or even how do we get whatever the steps are before the sale? That's
Dude.
the direct response piece of it. So
Yep.
yeah,
So me, if unless you're saying you're smarter than Daniel and David Ogilvy, which I also agree, this is the actual truth. This is one of the most common questions copywriters get asked, And to me, it's like as simple as that. There's not much more to it than that. It's just like context window, right? So I don't, or at least maybe there is more nuance. But if you're a good copywriter, you just divisively say that it's simple. Um, Dude, like I don't even know what my initial question on that was, but that was a great take. And I'll say
Yeah, it
now,
was something
you,
like, I don't know,
where are you
what's
stuck
the
and what do you
most
need? What
exciting thing?
energizes you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
Uh,
We've kind of danced around the topic of AI a couple
yeah.
times, but I'll
Let's
address it
open
right
loop again,
now.
or you can close it.
No, what was it? It's like, look, I'm I'm not an AI evangelist at any or in any way, but I'm also not a Luddite. So it's like you have to sort of acknowledge this thing that is there in all of our lives right now. What I believe to be the case is most companies kind of overcorrected. They said we can get rid of 90% of our copywriting overhead, 90% of our copywriting production time, and just have the bots do the whole thing. And now we're kind of a few iterations into that experiment. And for the most part, the results have been mixed at best, I'd say. A lot of
Mhm.
companies have had success, but for every success story I've heard, there's another one that's like, man, these things just suck, you know?
Yeah.
And I think what has occurred to me is that unfortunately, there probably is a little bit of erosion of the copywriting opportunities. And that erosion probably happens in the middle, meaning at the very extreme ends of experience and results, it's never been better, to be frank. Like all of the companies that I know, they basically want some sort of master of copy chief, whatever you want to call it, to more or less oversee the rest of that process.
100%.
And then maybe younger, less experienced copywriters are doing a lot of the actual heavy lifting of getting things created.
Yeah, I
And
agree
so
with you. It's
there's
been the most
probably
I've
less
experienced.
opportunity in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if I have any. I don't really know if I need anything to answer your question directly,
No,
but
like that's a very contrarian take again too. And also I agree, I'm observing it firsthand is the people that I give the AI tools that like are working for me, to people that don't have the fundamental skill set, they never progress. So they like permanently stay at the same skill level, which isn't good. That means giving a junior copywriter a fancy tool makes them 20% more productive. They stay there for forever, even if it does. You get maybe if they know how to use it, a great win. You train them up. So training to me isn't the answer. I tried that first. It's just like, why aren't you guys using it? I'll train you to do it. Then I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, skill erosion. And like it'll happen to me, but it'll happen to me last if I continue to do it too. So like getting back on the horse, if you value competence and you value mastery, I think is will never be the case. The tool will never, if it gets good enough where it's so much better than us at everything, we'll probably go and do something else. But until then, yeah, I would say we're probably the ones who have the most experience preside over it. And what I've found then too on the iterative side, when I use it for rapid iterations and trying to just speed right through all my frameworks that have ever worked, is that there's a plateau eventually. So you just hit plateau faster on the iterative stuff, or you run out of money because capital is still a main constraint when you're
Yeah,
testing.
and there's a
Mm,
very interesting corollary or side thing to what you just said, which I think a lot of the reason that there's been failure on the business side, I mean, we can go back to what young copywriters should do, but on the business side, I think there's been a lot of failure because related to what you said about capital being a constraint, most of these businesses didn't need more output. Maybe in
yeah,
certain contexts, like at the ad level, and if you're a high production publisher, you probably need a lot of leads. But
right.
most companies are actually constrained by volume. Um, and they're not trying to solve the right problem, in my opinion. They just thought like we'll try to push out more and more stuff, and then they don't have the operations or the
Efficiency for the sake
systems
of
to push
efficiency.
it all out, or they don't have the volume to test it all,
Yeah,
right?
and I don't. I've never had more backlog copy in my life in my career than right now. But yeah. Just and that's
And
when I stopped. I was like, well, this doesn't make much sense.
yeah, and so some of the kind of research that I've been doing into the effectiveness of AI, not in marketing specific context, but just sort of across industries and businesses, is that yes, there is a case for automation, and that's very obvious when you think about rote tasks and things like that. But the less you get off of that extreme, the less useful it is in automation. At the other extreme, what seems to be the story or the narrative at this moment, if you really read the McKinseys of the world and the Boozes of the world and what they're saying, they find is that it's almost like using it more for collaboration, ideation as a next person to be talking to. And that's personally how I use it quite a bit, which
Hmm.
is I am almost always using AI just as another smart person to talk about ideas with, to get ideas, to go back
Yeah.
and forth.
Yeah.
There is, of course, the problem of it being just a complete brown noser, and you have to kind of work around that.
Yeah. How do you turn off the
For
confirmation bias that most language models are programmed with, especially OpenAI?
well, for me, what I have found is that most of the stuff that I'm working on is not stuff that I wrote originally. It's actually coming from junior copywriters, and I think that my specific Chat GPT knows that enough at this point where it's willing to be like, this idea you got from that copywriter is junk. Like, let's talk about a new one.
Yeah, you're not
Uh,
right-wing conservative trying to justify some sort of action.
yeah. And so for me, that's where I found the most use is just, it's almost like, again, to sort of go back into the heritage of copywriting. Gary Bencivenga had this thing where he said, like, I just imagine that I have all the great copywriters of history sitting around a table whenever I have a new problem, right? Eugene
Dude,
Schwartz
that's
and all
what I
these
want
guys.
to. Yeah.
And so that's almost how I use it is like, what if I just had an incredibly smart other person helping me? But I'm also cognizant enough of where it may not be useful. Like I said, I was talking to Aaron Winter quite a bit last week, and it was in an area where I was like, I don't even want to talk to AI about this because I know I'm not going to be able to bypass a lot of those issues with it just telling me I'm right or the way to go because it doesn't have enough context. The amount of time it would take me to feed the context where Aaron is fully up to speed just because he
Oh,
knows who I am and all of the things that I'm trying to accomplish. Like it's way faster to just pick up the phone. And that's probably one of the downsides, right? Is people sort of forget like, you have all these smart humans around you that can help too.
they,
We're not just
they are.
dependent on.
Well, I don't want to make a recommendation quite yet, but I just waded into these waters now where I found something other than custom GBTs because that I feel like all copywriters, or not all, maybe, but a lot of them have said that same thing. And I've said it too. I'm like, I just want like the greats kind of like in grayscale above me being like, yo, Gary, can you rewrite that with your like signature bullet style or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Um, he actually, I did think of last week, and I misspelled his last name. I was like, Balenciaga bullets. Like, so
That's hilarious.
yeah, so like knowing
Samsonite, I was
knowing the
way off.
classics, but yeah, like you wouldn't have known to know what to tap. Like, I'm not going to tap David Ogilvy to write a TikTok hook. Well, you probably actually that would work too, but you know what I mean. He'd probably be good enough to do it. So I just want those people, and I found Delphi recently for me. I built for Pace, who is our biggest brand in our portfolio of brands,
Oh,
and
they
it just
build like the custom model, right?
yeah,
Delphi. Yeah.
but it's so easy for someone on your team to do. I could show you a back end after this, but it ingests multimodal. So like I can throw out videos, VSLs, docs, PDFs, MP3s, links, social media. So it's really good at indexing. If you value the comprehensiveness of being able to easily index without getting slowed down and integrate things, then it's a great solution. Because
That's
mine has,
interesting. And
yeah, it's trained on
I've
so many.
actually been looking at Delphi recently because, like I said, most of the work that I do, I'm not writing really anything other than test copy from a blank page anymore. Always working off of junior copywriter stuff. And I have, at this point, thousands and thousands of video calls recorded of me in my coaching group, coaching copy. And so what I have been considering, and now you're really making me feel like it's time to pull the trigger on that, is using the Delphi models to train off all that. And then I can give the junior copywriters that bot to basically at least go through the first round of revisions without me.
Yes, dude, it's all right. I'll I can introduce you to their team if you end up checking it out and liking it. But this was like the initial scope because I had a lot, much like you, high standards and requirements for how it would be to build. So like we came up with this use case document for what they wanted, and then I found it was actually pretty easy to self-implement for the most part. Like the back end looks like this. And the thing that I find the most useful is I come in here, this is Paces, then I'll show you mine. Um, Legendary quality mine. In fact, they said no one, I think, has indexed more than us. Paces is at 20 million words it's training off of like every day. And
Wow.
from the users who use it over the last 30 days, I'm gleaning insights that this is useful for AI. Like this, I had to manually read one by one in order to get there, which there's utility in that, but I can still drill down from popular questions and click into them. It just rolls up the popular questions into like significance of count. So for me, it's like, okay, once you'll see when it renders here, I can actually get a sense really quickly of maybe lead magnet themes or like major areas that our users are stuck on. Let's just do less sevens just so it doesn't take forever to load. Um, and like the usage metrics, we're just in beta and it's only for our mastermind units, but I can go deeper here. And I'm like, sweet, I wish I could go even deeper again and get direct quote. That would be like perfect. But that's just from a dashboard view. And then you can see from the mind, yeah, 22 million words. And it's updating
Yeah,
every because it's
that's
connected
crazy.
to, yeah.
Especially when you consider that against some sort of custom GPT build.
Correct. Like, and it's always now like this is how many it failed on, but once you set up the like social integrations in your drive and everything, if it hits one of those things, it pulls it in on a cadence, and then you can turn on the last thing you might really love, which I was like, thank you guys for thinking of this, is not this. Some models have this speaking styles, purpose instructions. There is, oh, it's in advanced. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I want to know what advanced stuff you're doing. You can do freemium gating, like if you want to use it to do free consulting for 3 questions, like an OnlyFans model, and then it gates of just like,
Mm,
hey, now it's time for a call with me, Daniel Ferrari, right? You asked me your 3 wishes, which we're about to try next. But this I am about to play with next, which is automations, triggers, and yeah, you can see all the risk stuff that I've learned too when a user mentions harming others 29 times. Well, come on, community.
wow.
100-day
Yeah.
ban, profanity. Yeah. So like you can do all this type of stuff, but the one I was looking for was just a slider that said turn on recency bias. And it was as simple as that of just like, do you want it to work like the human mind, or do you want it to be all knowing 22 million like words that it reaches and indiscriminately, goes slower most likely in order to find that?
That's good because you mean the recency of the training, right?
Yeah, which is important for
Yeah.
me because the advice in marketing moves a little bit faster than advice in real estate. So if I'm like, sometimes people accuse me of coming now that like, have you ever been called old yet in this industry? It used to be I was like
Yeah,
younger.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a grizzled vet at this point,
Yeah,
dude. I'm
right.
40.
Someone called me and
Like there's nobody like there's very
yeah,
few
Grizzle,
people
that's
older than me at
good.
this point.
I interviewed a guy last week who I really loved, and he's just like killing it right now. And he was like, "You OGs." I was like, "Oh, I got OG status now." Like
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, "That's cool."
That's
There's
hilarious.
right. So yeah, like the ability to go back. Some people would might accuse me of coming up much like you or the SEO era. I came up in like the Facebook ads 2009 to 2011 era where you can only target like name audience, do a bunch of stuff that was like uncompliant. So it like at my worst, I'm just like, yeah, just like write that. And they're like, that won't get approved. I'm like, okay, change the income to like 7 figures. And they're like, figures like is out. I'm like, fig. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, we can't do that either. I'm like, then like come up with some
Uh,
metaphor,
yeah,
10
what's the best
racks.
way to say it?
Yeah, right. Whatever it is these days, but you can
The
still get
compliance
around it.
stance. Yep.
Yep, compliance. So that's the only thing that I usually think of when it comes to copywriters watching this and ad buyers is yeah, the TOS you might want to upload, which I've never thought to do is upload Facebook's current terms of service. There's a
Yeah,
link.
that's interesting.
But yeah, you might enjoy it. Um that's all I really wanted to say about AI. Where I was just excited to tell you that like
Yeah,
now,
yeah, no,
but the use case, the actual use case that I found it most useful for me, if I'm talking to myself, is rewrites in my own tonality, and I'll have to do a tonality score, because that's what I use it for. Like Pace is like quick fact check of find things, find quotes, find stories he's told. Hey, do you have any story? What do you typically say? What are the 100 most common lines that you start off a YouTube video saying? And
that's
get a
interesting.
template.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of the ways that I have viewed AI, and this is a little bit of a generalization, is I don't use it to make my work faster. I use it to make my work better.
me too. Yep.
Um, and like I said, that's a little bit of a generalization because to some of the things you just said, like consolidating massive amounts of data to find the 100 best hooks, or I use it a lot to consolidate Amazon reviews on competing products and things like that. It's very
Yeah.
useful for that
Oh,
sort of
that's
thing.
smart.
So that's
That
where it
I
does
haven't
make
thought of
me
that.
faster. But
Yeah.
for the most part, I'm using it to basically get better work out of the same number of hours. So if a certain project's going to take me 40 hours and it took me 40 hours 3 years ago, and it's still going to take me 40 hours this year, but I'm just going to get 30% better results out of it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's like at worst, it's having another copy editor who can look for just a hyper specific thing, right, in your
Mhm.
copy. So, what is your stance on copy editing? Having worked at like, I wish so much I'd worked at like Motley Fool, or Agora. Is the day I went to Paradigm Press, I was like, oh, this is where I was meant to be. Like, this is fun. Like, you guys
Yeah.
are all like me. Um, so yeah, I always kind of wish I was always kind of one or solo copywriter when I worked for other people or with maybe one other good person. That's about it. So I'm curious your experience with collaborating.
Um, you know, it's a nice to have. I don't think it's a necessity. You're going to get better output, but do you need the better output? I suppose is the question. Um, a lot of the work that I have done in my career has been in isolation and it's worked out just fine. But in an ideal world, I think everyone benefits from it. Like even I benefit from having other people read my stuff, take a look at it. There's just, and maybe that's another place where AI is useful, is just being that set of extra eyes.
Right. It's
But
the copy editor I never had.
there's also a short-term and a long-term answer to your question. The short-term answer is what I just gave, which is in every individual project, you are going to get more out of it. Does that make or break it? Probably not. But over longer horizons, I almost can't imagine not being in a state of constant learning as a copywriter.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to be in that constant state of learning than having someone who's better at you just constantly tell you what is going on that you're not seeing
I
and
agree.
ways to improve it. And I don't think any of us are above that. I mean, maybe Gary Bencivenga because he's just such a natural talent at this sort of thing.
Is he set up
But
on top of your rankings if you had to do a top five copywriters of all time?
well, I think he has a very different gift than a lot of other copywriters. My own writing style is probably much more akin to a John Carlton or Gary Halbert
Ooh.
or, these guys that are very, it's more of like a mix of like a John Carlton and a David Deutsch. Like there's a certain amount of
Oh, I'm
technical
in.
mastery in what I do, but then like I tend to write on a very high tempo, which is sort of the John Carlton piece of it. But Gary Bencivenga, who I know personally and is a very just like endearing, empathetic man, and I think that's what makes him different than a lot of other copywriters. Not to say that any of those other names that I just mentioned or any other copywriters aren't empathetic to a certain degree, but he just seems to have this understanding of the human condition that shines through in his writing
Interesting.
in a
What
pretty
sense?
special way.
Yeah.
Well, you look at like his ability to wear different hats as a copywriter, I think, is unmatched. Meaning
I
he can write these things that are lies, lies, lies. One of his classic promos about basically the lies of the financial industry is really just fueled by the the desire for retribution and something that's a little bit of a darker emotion. And he wore that hat incredibly well. But then you read his stuff in his olive oil business, and it's just kind of like the finer things in life that make life good. So I think he sort of was always in touch with different humans who weren't even similar to himself or wearing similar
Sure.
emotions on their sleeves. But the other thing that I think makes him special was his I always tell people in this sort of conversation that what I've always found different about him is I think he could have been a great novelist. I think if you read a lot of fiction, there's a lot of similarities in his writing
Just
to
how he
a
structures
more
stories.
how he structures stories and the way he tells the story, and he's not always leaning on sort of high impact excitement storytelling, which to be frank is kind of how I do it. And that's sort of the John Carlton thing that I just mentioned is this real kind of zing.
Yeah. So
But
you're saying
a
Carlton's
more
in
traditional, well,
or like
Carlton's writing is electric, right?
yeah.
Where a more traditional novelist or some of Benson Venga's stuff, it just has more of this kind of I don't nuance probably isn't the right word because I don't want to say that something like what I wrote or Carlton writes is not nuanced, but there's just a certain element of true mastery, I guess, of character development, even in his smaller stories that I don't think many
I haven't
other
read this.
copywriters have ever done.
What's if you what comes to mind is something that I should read if I fancied myself a copywriter that you would be concerned if I hadn't, which I probably haven't. So I'm gonna feel embarrassed.
Um, no, I mean the first thing that comes to mind is what I already mentioned, which is
Yeah,
his
one
olive oil letters.
all of our
Uh,
letters. Cool.
but he has some good stuff from the Magalog days. Get Rich Slowly. That
I
one
like
was great. The one for the Charles Gibbons letter. Um, those are ones that stick out in my mind as being very demonstrative of some of the things that I just said, where he just kind of has this talent for making the person that he's ghostwriting for come to life in a very real, tangible way, in a very human way.
okay. That's which is something that I'm not naturally great at, and it's something I would like to brush up on. And just like the different ways and approaches, I'm just intrigued by anyway. So I usually try to find them by use case. The first time, like last year, I wasn't not a Tony Robbins fan. I just was like, yeah, he's like the GOAT, the Godfather, like the dude to like endure to beyond. Like, so I had respect for him, but like he's not my cup of tea as far as like I'm a Tony super fan, right? And
Yeah.
personal development, like he is for others. But I went and saw him in person. He did like a affiliate, like small room date with destiny type approach, but just in a small room. And I was like, good Lord, this guy's level of mastery, it's something that I consider myself good at, is just so far above mine. How did he learn how to do this? Like I'm
Yeah,
seeing some
that's great.
psychological tricks that I don't even like. Normally I can at least pinpoint a guess as to why he did that. I'm like, why did he even say that? He just like
Hmm.
skipped, right? He skipped like five questions, and just went right rooted to the source of it. Um,
Yeah, there's certain
yeah.
people that are just very much wired to have that type of intangible skill. And then
Yeah,
that's kind of probably what you were noticing in that moment. And it can be kind of jarring, right? You're sort of
it
like,
was jarring.
what's going on here?
It
How
was
is
intense.
this person this good at this thing, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so needless to say, I was like, all right, now I'm gonna look into like who he learned from and what he's doing, like what branch of NLP like sorcery is this? So I was like, I know the basics, but the geez. And I was like, oh yeah, like he learned from Jim Rohn, I know, but I was like, I don't know who Jim Rohn learned for, but it all usually traces back to some sort of great who was then taught by someone great. So I like
Yeah.
to think that's been happening since the beginning of time, and I'm always interested who those like you know very well, like you're the people that have shaped in your style. So now I'm intrigued and I'm going to go back and probably grab a few. So I don't know. Like when people ask me my favorite, like Sean Vossler, also a student of the game, has like he goes to the library and gets like the actual like documents. Russell Brunson, when I met him, has a whole library full of classics and like Napoleon Hill, like super fan. And me, I just don't
Well,
have that.
it's what it kind of goes back to the conversation we had at the very beginning, which is there's just this level of curiosity, I think, with a lot of great salespeople, persuasionists, copywriters, whatever the category of specific influences, where they just love to consume knowledge
Yeah.
and make the connections between things that are either directly or indirectly related. And it's kind of what I was saying about being able to watch, say, TV or something and see, just intuit how a character is developed and things like
What
that.
can you think of a specific example where you're like, no one would know this, but that hook was really from Lost season 4 or like whatever it is?
Oh man, that's a good question. I can't think of that in specific, but I did a bunch of direct mail stuff a couple years ago, which was pretty interesting in that it allowed for a different style of storytelling than I might tell in a video, and particularly very dialogue heavy. And one of my favorite genres or guilty pleasures in fiction is the American Assassin series, which is written by Vince Flynn. There's a movie called American Assassin, which is based on one of the early novels. And it's basically one of these, there's 30 books and they're all about the same guy and he has saves the world in every different book. So it's not necessarily real in any sense, but they're page turners. They're the type of book that you pick up and it makes you feel like you're reading an HBO series or something like that. They're
I
just
can
so expertly done. And that guy has incredible dialogue in his books. And when
Dialogue
I got
is
into
such
that,
a weak point of mine. Like I
yeah,
don't even know how to do it, to be honest. It's
well,
just bad.
you may not need to, right? Because it's particularly in a lot of the video stuff, it falls apart kind of easily when you don't have the actual visual
Two people
of,
in a VSL is my worst situational to come into with no prep.
yeah. But anyway, I just found myself, it was actually quite nice because I'd be reading one night and notice all these little tricks of dialogue, and then I'd be the next day inside one of those direct mail letters writing dialogue and going like, oh, I know
That's
exactly how to do this.
cool. And that's a really good point too. I was going to actually ask you that next is how do you swipe and deploy? Because a lot of people swipe and you kind of brought up that like swiping and having the biggest swipe file is a source of pride for literally only copywriters, but it doesn't actually help you get anywhere, I found. So I don't know. How do you
Well,
feel swipe
it's
and deploy?
useful for inspiration is my answer.
Yeah.
I And that's another place where I think there was a lot of overcorrection or misuse of AI is people would say, hey, AI, take this lead and just make it from that offer to this offer.
Right.
And
Transpose
you
it.
can have a certain amount of success with that, but it gets saturated pretty quickly, or it's
Yep.
just not appropriate. And so it's like I said, there's some success stories, but there's a lot of people who failed. Um, and so it's kind of like the same problem just with AI is that swiping something directly carries a certain amount of risk, and you're probably better off thinking through it for a little while. So for me, swipe files are typically used to kind of stir the creative juices, so to speak. If I'm feeling really stuck, I'll just go read old copy or hand copy it, even another thing that I picked
That's
up
a
way back in the day. And I do believe that there's
oh,
actually some science around how that neurologically kind of unlocks certain parts of your brain.
yeah.
Um, so that's sort of the in the moment. Yeah, I feel like I always give two answers, but that's how it is.
No, I love how
There's,
your brain's working, like answering things too, because a lot of people have asked me that as well. Is like, should I still hand write this? To me, like that opinion, maybe I'll try doing that. I was taught I could just type it though, like, but same idea of just like taking your time, understanding, like,
well, to put it into your brain. Yeah. And so there's sort of that in the moment thing where if I have a very specific problem I'm trying to solve and I feel like I'm at a loss for words, literally, I will typically go read other swipes. I might go watch a VSL that I find to be particularly well done.
cool.
But the other part of that answer is there's more of an accumulation piece of all that, which is to use the AI analogy, you're just sort of building your own training model, right? The
Yeah.
more of the stuff that you just have buried in your head, it kind of pops up as being like, oh, I can go back to that thing to solve this problem. Or it's just subconsciously informing your decisions. And I think you said something earlier around how the problem that we will encounter with junior copywriters is that they're not taking the time to develop with AI in front of them. They feel like they don't have to, right? And I do
Mhm.
think that that's ultimately the problem that I'm talking about right now is whether it's reading swipes or going back and reading tested advertising methods or any of the other quote unquote sacred texts, like you really need to be building your own language model that can solve these problems basically on command.
Yep.
And every great copywriter that I know has been a student of the game. And I really just think that that's still the
So,
case. And it might even be more the case now where if you, so I said we could come back to the junior copywriters, and I guess I just sort of stumbled my way into it here. But if I were a junior copywriter right now, I'd take a look around and I'd say, okay, using AI is table stakes. Everyone's using AI. The people who will get better at it are the ones who are using it better, or who get better results are the ones who are using it better. And that's obvious. But it's kind of like this thing is you could work smart or you could work hard. The issue with that is that like there's some people who are going to do both,
yep.
right? So
Yeah.
if if you're only trying to work smart, I guess, by using AI to automate and cut down on your workload,
Hmm.
you're going to rub up against somebody who's doing the exact same thing with AI, but then spending an hour doing the type of stuff that we're talking about. And that person's going to get better results. Maybe not every time, but over long enough horizons. And that's really all that matters here is we're talking about careers, and you have to be able to do this stuff for years and years on end,
Yep.
unless, you luck into some way to make $100 million the first time. But for most people, that's not going to be
Yeah.
the case.
That, I don't know if I've ever seen that, to be honest. Like, yeah, if you want, that's such an important point. Like, that's the thing, working hard and smart. If you want to be lazy and use a tool and you have first mover advantage, good luck. I think in 10 years you should just go to clickbank.com and buy like some product because those will probably appeal to you. Their type of offers, right? Those are the offers that ghostwriters will sell to people on, a whim or a pipe dream. So to me, there's the inevitability of knowing what you want. But for some people, maybe they just want, I guess, the like I have you experienced this calling a customer or being with a user who was sold like a dream like that and just been like they were satisfied with what they got. They got the inspiration, maybe kind of what you were touching on, or they bought the possibility that it was possible and that was enough for them. For me, that's not enough, and I would be disappointed in myself, not usually the person selling it to me, but just disappointed that I thought life could be
Well,
easy.
yeah, I mean, now you start to get into market dynamics, right? Which is if you're a developing copywriter where you sold a dream of basically this is an automated, easy way to make money, or where you sold the reality, which is this is a career. And like any career, if you want to be on the right side of the bell curve, you need to be applying yourself. Um, I'm not so fully like immersed in our market and how new people are brought into it to fully know the answer to that, but I know what the reality is, which is if you want to do this successfully, you have to apply yourself. And I've seen a lot of examples of AI written copy come across my desk where it's just like, did you even read this after it came out of the machine? And that's a bit of an epidemic, probably.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, I think it will self-correct in a lot of ways because people are not going to just everything comes back to results. We've had sort of
Yep.
a couple of running themes here. That's one of them. And so if you're not getting results, you're going to very quickly have to look in the mirror and say why. And sure, maybe you were sold a bit of false promises coming into this. And if that's the case, then you have to ask yourself, do I want to apply to this? Or maybe it's just not right for you. And that's fine too. Um, but my contrarian view is that it's actually a great time to be a young copywriter for all the reasons that we've discussed, because I think there's quite a bit of opportunity. You basically have in a very like practical sense, you can make twice the money because you can do twice the work if you're willing to do it well.
Dude, like I said, I agree with you too much. nothing else really left to say other than I don't know how young copywriters are being brought in too, but I know human psychology and things catch up. Like things have caught up to me. It just won't be the AI one as quick. I forget. I don't. I'm whatever baby boomers told me I had too easy. I'm sure I did, and had to learn the hard way. Walking to school both ways or uphill both ways.
Yeah, yeah, uphill both ways with no
Yeah, so
socks, that
yep,
sort of
like
thing.
that's usually what I say at the end of something like this because I had Mark Lack on. Shout out to Mark Lack and had a conversation with him and he did like an Agora style doom and gloom sales letter like world's ending on AI and whatnot. I was like, dang, okay. So I always root back to the fact of just like no matter what happens, humans are adaptable and like sometimes it's interpreted as there will be no jobs for anyone coming out of college, so do X, Y, and Z. I think you guys just figure it out no matter what happens, is my personal opinion. Daniel, what's yours? I guess if you had to give words of wisdom.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I've always just been a fan of betting on myself. Um, in a lot of ways, most of the work that I do is formatted with deal terms where I'm really betting on my own abilities. And that's what I would just tell anyone. There's no better investment to make. There's no better person to bet on than yourself for the simple reason that I'm not saying like every one of us is brilliant or whatever, there's realities in terms of intelligence and all of that. But the one truth is that it's the only thing you have full control over. You don't
That's
have
right.
much control over anything else other than what goes on in between your ears and then how you act as a result of that sort of thing. And because of that, I think that it's almost a necessary thing that the only thing that you should really bet on is your own ability and then do whatever you can to make that bet pay off.
Yep. Pete Rose did, and it still worked out for him, despite him getting in trouble. So
It's a nice
he
pull.
did.
I like it.
Right. Like if that's the worst that happens, I was like, who's the worst example of someone betting on themselves? It still worked out great for him. So to me, great advice to end it with. I am over. Are we over time? I think so. But I really enjoyed this conversation. Let me just check my calendar. Is there any last, actually, if you had to add a PS, as some copywriters do who work at financial newsletters, do you ever write a PS
Yeah, of course. I mean,
and
how can you not have,
PPSs? Yeah.
how can you, yeah, and then PPPS,
Yeah,
all
so
that.
I'll actually I do have a buffer here until the top of the hour. So what would your PS be? Is there anything you need right now that anyone watching this can help you out with or think to do?
No, I mean,
Dang,
I think eventually everyone needs great copywriters. So just for people to listen to the advice that we just gave and level up
cool. So then
because there's a,
wait, then I'll say do that. Like let Daniel know in some way. I'll let you guys get creative. How do you like when people reach out to you? Just comments. You don't seem like you're trying to grow your personal brand to 1 million followers
um, I
fairly.
have an email list at
Cool.
ferrarimedia.com, but I believe the opt-in page is down at the moment. I'm gonna have to get that fixed. It's on my
Cool.
list to do in the next like 10 days though. So
No, no worries. I'll delay
shows you
the
how
sign on that.
seriously I take
We'll
that. Yeah.
we'll go to the CTA. It should be live by now. Uh right here. Dude, I kid, but thank you. I appreciate this conversation. It was a fun one.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for making me think. Get some really good questions.
Yeah, man.